Emily, great drink. Here we go. We're in episode 51.
We're so close to 52.
So close to 52. 1 year anniversary around the corner. We hit the 50s, just Dustin and I, but you're back in the zone.
Yeah, back in the zone.
Back in the basement.
In our studio.
How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm doing okay. I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I mean, summer school is just like a nightmare.
Are you still when are you done summer schooling?
It's just all of June.
All of June, okay. So you've just started.
Yes. I feel like so ready to be done. It's fine.
This is funny for me to think about the energy you brought in the last time we were together, where you're like, I can't wait for school to be over. But I still have the summer school thing, and now you're like, oh yeah, the summer school thing is real, and I'm ready to be done with it now.
Every time I told anyone I was doing summer school, they were like, why would you do that to yourself? And I'm just like, because you make so much money. And the money is pretty nice, but it's just, I'm like, I'm not sure it's worth my energy being sucked dry.
Is it like a harder, like, students in general are hard to like get to focus? So is it because it's summer, it's like harder to get attention? Or is it just like you're seeing all your friends run around and you're like, I want to be doing that? Or is it some combination?
Honestly, I just want to sleep in.
Yeah.
Being there is it's not difficult. Like, they just are like filling in packets and stuff.
Okay.
For credit recovery. And so I just am like, be quiet.
Is that what I've like never actually understood what summer school is. Is that what it is? You're just trying to like make up for things you didn't do during the academic year?
Yes. However, there's also enrichment, which is like getting ahead. And so I'm technically an enrichment teacher teaching ACT prep.
Oh.
Call me if you need ACT tutoring.
Hmm.
But none of my ACT students showed up.
Oh, bummer.
So that's like a little demoralizing. And then
that could be.
And then my room has just become like the place where kids go when they need peace and quiet. So it's not difficult work. It's just like everyone is like, woo, summer, and I just want to cry.
That would make me cry. Also, just random trivia about Danny. I thought everyone took the SAT, and I had no idea what the ACT was until I moved here. And like everyone takes the ACT now. Like, yeah, and maybe it's a Midwest thing. But everyone, not a single individual I knew took the ACT. Everyone was like, and every college on the West Coast was like just only taking SAT. Just weird. So what do you do on the ACT? No, we don't need to talk about this. We'll talk about this. I don't really. So what are we talking about?
This is a behind the zone topic, the ACT and how to get a good score.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
I want to talk about the idea of, quote, salvation issues.
Oh.
Or primary issues.
I love it.
I know. I feel like this has come up a lot in my just like conversations lately. Sure. And I'm not sure I have a ton to like say off the bat, but I think it's a topic that's really interesting. Actually, I do have a lot to say off the bat. I'm going to go into it. I know it. I'm guns a-blazing.
Yeah.
So both times it's come up this month has been about the like LGBTQ issue,
mm-hmm.
which I feel like is pretty, I don't know, I feel like
on par for Pride Month.
Right. I guess I just also mean like, I feel like during Pride Month, if you are like a little bit outspoken of like, I support this, you're going to get some heat.
Yeah. I have like some of my, like I have two, not friends, actually, colleagues that are Lutheran, more conservative pastors that like are never on TikTok. And they've both done series that they've started about like how it's loving to not be LGBTQ inclusive and trying to like which I only bring that up to say that like now this is the time of year where it's like both progressive people are really loud and more conservatives are really loud because they're trying, like both are trying to get a piece of airtime during this
which
season.
Is just like, I feel like this should be the last time where it's like the time to debate, because this is a time, maybe this is very like idealistic of me, but I feel like this is the month where it's like we are just like honoring the fact that people in the LGBTQ community have gone through like a lot of BS. And just like honoring that and honoring who they are. And so for Christians to use this month to discourse if it's a sin or not feels a little bit inappropriate. Yeah. Is that fair? Maybe it's not fair.
I think I agree. I'll play devil's advocate. Like if I was on the other side, this is the perfect time because I'm watching people
for sure
commit to a month of indulging their fleshly desires. And what better way to turn them around? You know? So
yeah, that's a good point.
I do get the driving. And that was actually one of the things. One of the guys that I am more friends with that I actually went to seminary with and know, he kind of the point of his series is like how being conservative or moderate is not being bigoted or unloving.
Okay.
And I'm interested to see what he
Yeah.
says, actually, because I think that there's a potential that can be true.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that there's people that I know that are really loud, and it's because they want to turn ideas around.
Yes.
And so it's like, this is an opportunity because the conversation there's so much momentum around it. Like, if you were on the other side, it's like, why wouldn't you jump in? Is playing devil's advocate of like why someone.
No, for sure. Because I used to use that rhetoric of like, it would be unloving for me to not be outspoken about like that it's a sin, because to not call out sin is to not be loving, even if people are mad at you. Mm-hmm. Like, I would have said that not that long ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've had different conversations, and basically, like, I feel like we've gone through. I'm not sure I understand.
Neither do I, sister.
I don't understand. That's funny. Basically, they've said, like, at the end of the day, you know, like, you're leading people to hell by saying that it's not a sin. And I said, for me, like, personally, I believe that LGBTQ issues, even though I think it deeply affects people, I consider it a secondary issue. Mm-hmm. Meaning, like, whether you affirm gay people or not, I don't think it's a salvation issue. Mm-hmm. I was like, it does, like, I know this is, like, so basic, but it's like John 3:16 doesn't say, like, you know, whoever believes that it's not okay to be gay will not perish but have eternal life. Right. Obviously, I get that that's oversimplifying, but I also think that matters. Like, so what I've said is, like, as I've been kind of, I don't know, people have just been, like, pushing back, and I'm happy to hear pushback, but I've also, even if we get to a place where I'm like, we're not going to see eye to eye on this, I say very strongly, I'm like, honestly, I just don't think either way this is an issue that, like, condemns us to hell. And people would disagree with me on that.
Yeah, I think that I have a couple follow-up questions too, but I'll ramble for a second first. I do think that it's interesting, like, the primary versus secondary issue thing is an interesting conversation. I remember I applied to work at this church several years back. It's in Austin, Texas. I think the church is called Restore. Like, the guy is... they were like a somewhat Baptist church. I think they've kind of pulled out. They're like pretty outspokenly progressive. Okay. But I remember interviewing with the guy. They were launching a new campus, and they were looking for a campus pastor. And we had a long conversation about the conversation around LGBTQ stuff. Mm. And I dive into and can dig on the secondary language stuff, where him and me and this guy I didn't really jive with is sometimes this, like, language of, like, this is a secondary issue is just another way to, like, push it to the side. Okay, yeah. And so I don't dig that. And I called him out on it. I wasn't a big fan. I was like, I think you're just saying this so that you can, like, expand your flock and get more people. And I'll say I dig it now. Like, he's, like, full bore into, like, outspoken. Yeah. And I think they may be still Baptist, or maybe they left their thing. What they're doing is really, really cool. And I think it's called Restore Austin. It's the name of the church. Cool. And so their church is doing really, really cool stuff on TikTok, but also in person. But I think I'm with you on, like, if we're using, like, John 3:16 or, like, any of these, like, things that talk about salvation, like, certain things like that, like there were some people that be like, being a woman pastor could be a salvation issue because you're overturning the order of man and woman. And I think that it's helpful to define what are primary issues and what are secondary issues in terms of, like, what are the things that if we believe there's a heaven and hell, which is another, like, assumed prerequisite to this conversation that we're not even really addressing. Yeah, absolutely. But, like, there has to be some, like, I just think it's interesting, like, for you, maybe, like, what you would determine are primary issues. But before you get into that, my question is, who are you having these conversations with? You're making it seem like you're having, like, hundreds. Who are you talking to about this stuff?
I mean, just some, like, different pastors and some friends who are more, like, fundamental conservative Christians.
You and Aaron Lucas, have more pastor friends than any human I've met. Right. You guys just cut it up with pastors all the time.
Well, and I feel like also, like, if I have a rapport with a pastor friend, I get that they will, like, challenge me, and I'm, like, happy to listen to that. But there is a point. This guy was just like, honestly, I just feel like being gay is the same thing as, like, being a murderer. And I was like, I just think that you should not say that.
Yeah. So we'll put a pin in that one because we'll get back to that nightmare of a comment later. But
yeah, and I just was like, that's not helpful in the conversation,
yeah,
and you're equating things that aren't true.
yeah.
It
I'm
just
sure
made
he's
me
trying to
angry.
say it's something to be like all sin is a sin, I guess is maybe, but like that's an unhelpful framework.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe the best place for us to start in this conversation, because I feel like we could jump around a lot. Like,
Yes.
what is primary for you? Like,
Okay.
if you're trying to define that, like, where do you go? And then what would you classify as your secondary issues?
Love it. This is where I'm struggling, actually. So you've hit the pressure point.
Okay.
So fast. But like basic my struggle with the idea of primary. Okay. We're going to get this. When I've talked to people about secondary issues, a lot of them say this, which says it's a slippery slope to not be fully biblical in the secondary issues, because then all of a sudden you're not going to be it in the primary issues. And I said, here's my struggle with that differentiation. Even though I use it in saying like not a salvation issue, meaning in a sense, like I think that I feel like in scripture it's laid out that just believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Like just very, that's just so simple and so broad. And when I think about the verse in, I think it's 1st or 2nd Peter that says like God desires all to be saved, to me that shows me that there is a God that is very much like makes that as wide as it possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I said what I struggle with the idea of secondary and primary issues is then all of a sudden there's this line. And I was like, the line makes me dislike the categories because to me, I'm like, I also do not think that salvation is like, there's this line in which like all of a sudden you miss the salvation line by one like minute doctrine. And I think that is the struggle, because I was like, the more you're adding to these primary issues or salvation issues, when I say primary issues, like how I grew up being taught is just like, primary issues are things like you have to believe in order to be saved. And secondary issues are things the church divides over but don't affect salvation. But the thing is, I would say, like growing up, they said the virgin birth is a primary issue. And I was like, I just don't see God, like, or, you know, at the gates of heaven, Jesus being like, you know, like you kind of got it, but you seemed like not really convinced that Mary was a virgin. Like, I just don't see that in the heart of God. And so I think my struggle more is like, I just feel weird about creating categories of like, you have to believe this in order to be saved. Yeah. And then not, because I think that's the slippery slope.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like I guess for you also that like, inerrancy of scripture, that's a primary issue. Would have been, right?
No, not anymore. I had a fight with someone like, at a bar yesterday about this.
Not saying for you currently.
Yes.
I'm saying like for your upbringing, inerrancy of scripture, primary or secondary.
It's hard for me to like almost put myself back in there, because I'm like,
but it was inerrant, right? And that was not questionable. So then it would have been.
I would say probably primary. I would probably have said you can't get to the primary issues without believing you can fully trust the Bible.
Okay, so
that's probably what I would have said. Yeah.
Virgin birth, primary issue.
I was always kind of like, what? But sure.
Resurrection, primary issue.
Primary issue. Jesus being God. Yeah.
Our gender roles, like, what did that like?
Not a primary issue. Like, we would say that egalitarians were still going to heaven.
Oh, interesting. Okay. There was a part of me that thought that wasn't true, actually. That there would have been like more complementarian folks would have been like, if you're egalitarian, you're like, which for anyone who's like not lingo-wise, like egalitarians, like it's equal, like men and women are equal complementarian, like you only serve to complement the things that I do well as a woman to a man.
Yeah.
And so that you wouldn't have thought that would have been like,
no.
Okay. Interesting. So secondary would have been like,
and I actually, sorry to interrupt you a little bit, but I actually always pushed against this. I was talking with our friend Aaron about this the other day, because he was raised Oneness Pentecostal. And I, for a while, was like the assistant director of this website. We tried to be like a college version of the Gospel Coalition.
I think you've told me this before.
And so we would just like write theological articles. And this one guy wrote like, "Are Oneness Pentecostals going to heaven?" And I was just like, you just can't. I was like, that's not the point. Like, I was like, why are you writing this article? You don't know. And you're making the Trinity a primary issue. If you think it's a primary issue, okay. But I just think it's creepy for you to write an article being like, they're not saved because they don't believe in this one doctrine. So no, I was always pretty firm on like, even like, this is something my mom used to say that I loved. She said like, you could get 99% of it wrong, but get the fact that like Jesus like loves you and died for you, like you're good.
Yeah.
And I was like, hell yeah.
Heaven, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I think that's great. I think we should put that on a t-shirt.
yeah, I think that's beautiful and important. But also that was easy for here's the other thing. This is where it gets interesting, Danny. This whole idea was also kind of moot to me because I was a Calvinist / I don't know, whatever. But like, but it's like, who cares what's the salvation issue? Because it actually has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting conversation to have in that regard. Like if it's already predestined or predefined, it's like, then
the salvation issue is like, is a stupid thing to say because I mean, I had a friend one time that was like, I think if you're not a Calvinist, you're not saved. Like, I think that's a primary issue because then like you don't understand the heart of God. And I was like, I think that's the dumbest thing you've ever said. Yeah.
I think a lot of people believe that across, like not just Calvinists. I think like a lot of different people think like, if you don't think like me, then you're not saved. Also, I do think that that's so I want to go back to this comment, the 99%. If you get 99% right, I think that's a great thought experiment. I think most people don't actually believe that.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But I think that's super important.
Yeah. I think yeah. So
to me, that's the epitome of the faith of a mustard seed.
Yeah.
It's like, and I would say like, I grew up in a very like, let's get our theology right kind of way. And I just remember sometimes my mom would say that to me when I was getting really lost in the weeds. And then my mom would say that and it would be like very calming. Like it would be like, okay. Like I was like, I still enjoy this journey and I'm embracing this journey. But like I'm enjoying getting to know who God is via his word and via theology.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, nothing, like the stakes are decently low salvation wise.
Yeah.
And I really loved that.
Yeah. So this seems somewhat connected, and I can't remember what I posted something on Facebook, and this will come back around in a second. I can't remember. It had something to do with truth, maybe. Like I was preaching about the Bible. I can't remember what I preached about last weekend, but it's something in regards to like literalism. It was like
in the Bible gives the black and white of like morality or truth or something.
And someone commented, "Truth is personal." That was like one of the things I said, because I think there was an implied like, well, what is truth? Maybe I said that in there explicitly or implicitly. And I've been thinking about that, and if the person who said that listens to this, I would love to hear more about it. But I think it's completely wrong, actually, because my truth could be I don't think murder's wrong. Like if that's personal to me, like everyone, like there is some agreed upon level where we don't actually accept that to be true, right? Do you understand where I'm going with this? Like.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree, but okay.
Well, so you don't think that... Well, so...
Just keep going.
Yeah, so I think that can't be true. I think it's too problematic. And I think that when we have a level... So going back to what we're talking about in our faith and these non-negotiables or the primary, secondary, I think that that's an interesting thing to dive into in this is like, it either is all relative or it's not all relative. And there's not a lot of middle ground. Like you can't... when I read that comment, I was like, I dig that. But then I was like, how far are you willing to let that thought experiment go?
Right.
To say truth is relative or truth is personal. Like, how far are we willing to go to let our own individual desires, hopes, and plans and purpose define what is truth?
Yes.
So I just read it and I like the person said it and I think it's great.
Yeah.
But I just like the more I thought about it, I was like, do I actually subscribe to that? And I'm someone who loves gray. Like I don't need black and white. But I don't know that I can be like all truth is personal.
This is going to feel like a moot distinction, but this is my therapist and I were talking about this and I thought it was interesting how he said it because I was getting it was getting murky to me. Like I was talking about truth and I was like, blah, blah, blah. I don't even remember the conversation. And he stopped me and he said, fact is objective. Like fact is one thing. And he was like, but truth is personal. And So, and I'm just going to ride this out. I'm not sure I'm ready to defend this that fully, but I'm just going to present it. But what I was thinking as you were talking is like, fact is, it harms people to murder them. Like, that is a fact. Lives are lost.
Kills them. Doesn't just hurt them.
I mean, but also harms people around them. You know, you kind of harmed me with that. Anyway, it is harmful.
Yeah.
It is harmful. Maybe that's not a big enough term. It creates havoc and pain in the world.
Not just the dead person, but for the people around them.
Yeah,
yes.
That is, to me, that is a fact that I think everyone would be like, yeah, it causes pain. Truth, I think everyone would see that fact. I'm just gonna dig my heels in. I'm not sure I feel great about it, but I'm digging my heels in. Like, but to me, truth is that like people would look at that and then they would say, so I think that murder is wrong. I think some people would be like, I'm not sure if I think that. And I don't agree with that. But I think that's there. I think truth is such an interesting word. I think
you're and me. So we are getting caught up on the word truth. But what I think is interesting in that, when it's like truth, fact, primary, secondary, like all of those point to something that's like paramount to the ethics that we build, or the ethos that we like, whatever the faith we build, like something's at the center of that. And I think that's what are you gonna say? Sorry.
We're looking for the like immovable commonality that like no one can debate.
You're saying that's what we're doing right now?
I think that's what the world is trying to do.
Yeah.
And so when people say truth is personal, to me, I hear them saying, like, we can't find that thing. And I think sometimes it's easier to just be like, there isn't that thing.
Right. Maybe. But to go to like, so what makes, let's loop this back into these primary and secondary issues, right? Like, so then how much latitude are you giving any people around you to personally define what is truthfully secondary and primary to them? And why does it irk you if truth is so personal? Then it's like their thing to deal with.
This is a really good question. You're a little proud of that question.
Feel good about
it. This is where I'm at with that, is that because it's not the issue of like, if you want to say something's primary and secondary, you are making a comment on someone else's eternity. That's what irks me. I don't care if you think that gender roles are more important than I think they're important. It's when you say that you agreeing with me means that you spend eternity in misery or in paradise. That's going to freaking irk me. Because you are gatekeeping heaven with your theology.
Yeah. I hear that.
Okay. I don't really know how that connected, but that's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, another interesting thing, like, and we don't have to walk this route, but I think it's interesting you're talking about like gatekeeping eternity. It's like, I actually don't think they are like anything, right? Like they are presuming they are gatekeepers, like we think we are. Like we're not the ones in control of anyone's eternity, right?
Absolutely.
And so a lot of it's our own exercise in trying to explore what we think the gates and the parameters and the boundaries are. But when it comes down to it, it's like we're not the ones holding the keys to the gates at all, right? And so some of it does cycle back to that idea of, and I think you actually were really like wise in saying this. I think we are trying to differentiate what is fact and what is truth, or whatever words we want to use from that. Like we're trying to decide like what about life is objective and subjective? Mm-hmm. What about faith is objective and subjective? What about eternity, ethics, all those things?
Yeah.
And I think this is where and the whole reason I brought the truth thing up, this is where I fall into, this is a self-proclaimed like progressive person.
Okay.
Is I do think that like, and I hate using the term slippery slope, but I can see the slippery slope of being like, well, everything is relative, or truth is subject. Like then it becomes like, then why do anything? Like, and I don't fully actually mean what I'm saying, but it's like
we've had this conversation on the podcast before.
Well, that was a different thing. That was saying if Jesus didn't whatever, then why, whatever. But it just becomes an interesting perspective for me if it's all about personal experience and there is no objective truth.
Yeah.
Then some of this, not all of this, is like the debate becomes somewhat of a waste of time. Benefit in the sense that it's like it's helping you grow in your humanity and personhood or whatever. But if like there's nothing that's objectively true, then we both shouldn't spend so much time debating it and equally so much time getting irked about other people's difference of opinion.
I get what you're saying. I think that even if truth is relative, you get irked by things people say because they hurt other people.
Yeah, more what I said was in a vacuum, because I mean, whether I believe things are relative or not, like I'm going to get irked and not like that was more like
but I get. I think what you're saying is there's something in us that's defending something that is true and right, and if there's nothing true and nothing right, then like what do you need to defend?
Yeah,
like if you like I think that's what you're maybe trying to say.
I think it's close. Yeah. And I even think like looping it back to the primary thing and saying like, I would say like for me, like I don't have a lot of primary, like Jesus is God. Like that's primary for me. But it's like everything else kind of becomes secondary. And I could probably like maybe fight for like other.
So I'm not sure right now. I think Jesus is God.
I'm not telling you need.
So you think I'm going to hell?
No.
Like, is that the secondary? Is that the primary issue?
I think it's a primary, like, again, you're putting on it a different, like, bend of, like, what the person used in your conversation of, like, primary means you get out of hell free card. You don't have it, you go to hell, right?
Yeah, okay,
I don't
totally
necessarily,
fair.
like,
yes.
So I think there's a couple different ways. To put this first, I would say to be a Christian and to put yourself in that box, it's a primary issue.
Okay, yeah.
Like, but not everyone needs to or wants to be put in that box. But I think, like, to be a banker, you have to work at a bank. So to be a Christian, you probably have to be a person that believes in the Christ and Jesus, right? So like seems primary. But for me as like my personal beliefs, like I've talked about like I'm pretty pluralistic and I think Jesus can present himself in a myriad of different ways. Like I'm not limiting the power and the expansive nature and salvation that Jesus offers. But Jesus is central to me. Like I'm not a Buddhist or a Hindu, I'm a follower of the way of Jesus, and so for me to be a part of that, he becomes primary. Now, if someone like doesn't believe in Jesus, do I think they're going to hell? I've almost never thought about that. Like at least in my last like 15 years of life, like when someone's like, "Hey, I don't believe in Jesus," it never comes to my mind like, "Oh, it sucks. Can't wait for you to spend eternity in hell."
Yeah.
But as I said many times before, like I care about what he's done in my life, so I want to share that with people.
Yeah.
But I don't view it as like I'm doing this just as a way to save you from something. But as I've said like before, it's like I care so much about it, I want you to experience the goodness that I've had. Now, on the other side, I've experienced a lot of times where I've shared how dope I think Jesus is with people. They're like, I've been hurt so bad, like I can't see anything but pain and red. You know what I mean? So not everyone sees what I think is awesome as like it sees it the same way I see it. And so that's another idea of like what we receive and consume is somewhat relative, right? So but yeah, I don't know, like I think it's interesting to have a conversation even about primary and secondary things, like depending on where you sit. Like for you to have them, I'd be interested to know like if like I'm not sure exactly what I think about Jesus. That's an interesting thing to like. I think you're probably not like a literal heaven and hell person, right? Like, no. So it's an interesting thing to debate the salvation of people in a construct you don't believe exists. I think there's like a lot of these things that fall within there that I'm like, it's just interesting to be like, for you to spend emotional investment in something that you don't have any skin in the game for, as far as like that belief system. Like, I think you're like an active member of the church community that you're a part of, and like the well, and you're getting more involved there and all those things. So like, I don't mean it in that way, but it's like to spend a lot of time in that like framework is interesting because it's like you don't subscribe to much of it. So you're speaking different languages.
I think that's 100% true. And I feel like this is a debate that I wouldn't need to have with anyone in my current church community, probably.
Yeah, I imagine, and I wasn't in these rooms, but I imagine that the conversation was brought upon you. I don't imagine you were beating down doors to talk about primary and secondary issues.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I maybe brought up the terms
Uh-huh.
in trying to say like this isn't actually that big of a deal to talk about, and then it became like the first guy I talked to. It came down to the point where he was like, repentance is required for salvation, and then if people aren't repenting from being gay, they're going to hell.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I mean, we're just never going to be on the same page of that.
Yeah.
But like to him, he was like, it is a primary issue. So by you saying it's okay to be gay, you're leading people to hell.
Right.
And I think for me, it's really interesting that you say like these categories aren't even what you subscribe to anymore. But I just know how they affect people.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a point in which like whether I believe it or not, I'm like, please stop saying that. Not that I'm trying to not be tolerant or not listen. Like, I was also, like, talking to someone about that. I was like, I do think that we have to make space to listen to people who think differently than us and to have those conversations and to see, like, this person shows me some beauty of who Jesus is that, like, I don't see. And I'm thankful for, like, my friends who are in different faith camp, like, different denomination camps than me, even if we disagree about, like, issues like this, because I'm, like, I'm reminded of really important things about who God is in those moments. Like, it's not all not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting and I think a really good perspective. Like, and actually something that I'm like preparing to say a little bit this Sunday at the Well is like that there is a lot of benefit in surrounding yourself with people of like theological diversity, of upbringing diversity, like of all the things. Like there should be like some sort of benefit from hearing different thoughts and hearing those things and starting to like paint a more full picture of like the life experience and faith and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's like I know, going back specifically to the LGBTQ issue, I know some people who are like, I'm gay and I think that's great, and I'm like, awesome. I know some couples who, like, one of them is gay, but they are in like a heterosexual marriage because they think that's the best way to follow God.
Right.
And I know some people who are like, I reject the term gay because that's not me, like, living in who I am in Christ. Like, I have relationships with people in all of those different camps.
Yeah.
And, like, when I was thinking about the idea of pride, like, I was like, I feel really strongly that these people should be included and welcomed and celebrated for who they are, and, like, God loves them and, like, loves who they love. But in having relationships with people who are more on the conservative, less inclusive side, I'm like, I can also, even if I maybe disagree and maybe don't think that that's like the best choice, I respect the fact that that is how they have decided to follow God.
Mm-hmm.
And to them, that is how they are pursuing obedience. And I feel like I don't really have the right to say that that's wrong. And I just think that's cool.
Yeah.
Versus like, I think sometimes in inclusive spaces, we can be like, if you're not inclusive, you suck. And I've gotten to a place where I'm like, I think you should be inclusive, and I think you hurt a lot of people when you're not. But if that's how you're living your life personally, like,
yeah,
then what am I supposed to say to that?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I'm always fighting like competing different things I want to say.
Yeah.
Like the thing that's like what I believe the most, or the most inflammatory, or the most sassy. So
I feel like that's the classic Enneagram 8 dilemma.
it is. It's always when I'm wrestling with. I think this is the last thing I'll say about this, but we might have more about it. I was thinking about my conversation over Facebook I had with the evangelical pastor from Kansas City named Dan.
Okay.
We talked about him.
Pastor Dan.
We talked about him a few episodes ago, and I was just reflecting as you were talking on what I presume to be what his primary issues were. And it would have been wholehearted surrender to Jesus. But I think it was disguised as like what the real issue was knowing who was going to heaven. Like for him, the most important thing, like we have all these other like theological things. And I do think, and this is why I appreciate and kind of affirm where you're coming from, like the conversation around heaven and hell, and it's one of the most common things we've talked about through this, like the thread that's kind of constantly woven through, because it undergirds almost all of this conversation, like whether it's Jesus, gender roles, LGBTQ, whatever. And like I was thinking back on our conversation, like his only goal was to just convince me that I was going to hell if I didn't do this. And that was actually the most primary issue in our conversation, was salvation. And I think like that's what makes this conversation around that hard to navigate, because if they're not around things that are making you more saved or less saved, then it's like it's for him or for me, it's like, why would we have the conversation? For him, it's like he had no interest in talking about anything other than my wholehearted surrender and release of the cult of wokeism to embrace Jesus.
And there's a beauty and an importance to the idea of like finding unity in the church even when we disagree on a lot of things, and saying like, but at the core we are similar.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think when I say secondary issues, that's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you're right. Like, if you take heaven and hell out of the picture, I think the idea of primary and secondary kind of goes away.
Yeah, and I like in this again, like I think the Well is a community built around the idea of like, there's a lot of things are secondary. Like we have pretty progressive people, pretty conservative people. We have gay people. We have straight people. We have people that think gay people are going to hell.
Yeah.
And people that aren't sure, and then people that are like, why would you even think about my life in my bedroom, right? Like they're like across the spectrum of that. And I do think like even when we look into the New Testament, it's like in the letters especially, like they're doing a lot of arguing but not disunifying. Like they're trying to stay together, but they are also trying to get a core belief of what they know they're moving towards, and I think that's interesting. Like we wouldn't be where we are today if early Christians, like if Paul and all of his friends were like, truth is personal. Like they had to figure out what they believed to be true. And for them, it was fact. They were close enough to Jesus where it was like,
right.
It was like, I saw this, or I know someone that saw this, right? And so, but I think that's interesting. Like there has to be some level of there has to be some level of inclusion of people that don't agree with you to like do the work Jesus calls. But there is also, it's like, it's growing wide and refining in some ways of like, everyone's welcome, and we actually mean that. But also like, what are we unified under? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like I don't get up and like have you ever been to a Baha'i church?
No. Like
Baha'i churches, like they'll sing an Amy Grant song, they'll read something out of the Quran, and they'll read something out of the Bible or whatever, right? And so they like mix and match. It's like a hodgepodge of kind of general mainline religion, like the most popular religions, but they probably pull other things. Like we don't do that, right? Like it's like we're like, hey, like we're pretty team Jesus here. Like we focus on that. And so I think like that is an interesting differentiation too. It's like we can be equally, we're really, really wide in who we accept, but somewhat narrow in the form of belief that we hold. But we'd be considered wide in the belief we hold within like the tribe we're a part of, you know?
I think like we're narrow in topic in a sense of like, we're going to talk about what Jesus says about this and how Jesus shapes whatever topic we're talking about. That is like very Christian and not very quote unquote inclusive of like other belief systems, I guess. But at the same time, I think absolutely people would say we're not like wholeheartedly fighting for the gospel enough. Because people equate other things with the gospel. Yeah. I feel like we could talk about this forever, and I feel like I don't know how to wrap it up.
I'll wrap it up with this on this part, because I think
the man has to have the last word.
I think that's true. That's in the Bible. I don't believe that. If this is your first time watching, I don't believe that.
Take that clip out for TikTok.
I'll put it on YouTube. I'll put it on TikTok. It'll be great. I would say this was a shift for me, and this isn't like, oh, Danny's like the smartest person in the world, and like he figured it out. But I would say I shifted from referring to it as the LGBTQ issue, and it's like they're people. You know what I mean? Like,
very good point.
I think that's what I think is really hard about this conversation. We otherize and we turn people into an issue, and it's like all those people you named are humans with experiences. 100%. And it's like when I have any conversation about any theological topic, I try not to like communicate it in terms of like issues and more of like who are the people we're talking about. And I'm not saying you were doing that, but
no, but I think that's a good point and a good thing that our words like have power, and the way that we talk about things is important.
Yeah. So we're somewhere in the 40.
I think we should skip email corner, but I think we should talk a little bit about recommendations.
Yeah. Well, I would have said it the other way around, but the woman gets the last say. So
we don't have time for email corner.
Yeah, up top. We have as long as we want. But go ahead. Skip recommendations.
Well, because I really want to talk to you about something specific.
I don't have a recommendation. That's really why I wasn't that interested in it.
I gave John Mulaney's Baby J another watch
Oh, yeah.
and loved it. Because I remember the first time we talked about it, I was like, I watched it at 4 a.m. I was not with it.
And I was like, I dug it. And you were like, I'm not really sure.
And I was just like, what? But I was so tired. I watched it when I was awake, and I thought it was I thought it was marvelous. Like, so well done. So, to me, very, like, it felt very self-aware. And, like, I felt like he didn't leave any, like, elephants in the room. Like, he named all the things everyone was thinking of, like, is John Mulaney going to talk about this?
Yeah.
Also, I just thought it was hilarious, and I was laughing out loud.
Yeah, I loved it. Which is why I recommended it. Yeah. I thought that it would. Yeah, unlike any other stand-up special that at least I can think of off the top of my head, like it felt like it seamlessly went in between comedy and like just like you were getting a glimpse into his life. Like,
yes.
And you never felt like it was like not herky-jerky, like you jumped in and out. Like it was all very connected, and that's one of the reasons I really liked it. And like you said, it was super self-aware, but also really funny.
Yeah, all of it. And like, in just like the way that I just feel like he makes fun of himself a lot in this special, more than he ever has, in a way that is very endearing.
Yeah.
Like I love this story when he's like, when his friends are having his intervention, and he's just like, "Can I go to the bathroom, please?" Like that's like a theme throughout him, like going to rehab is just him like trying to do more coke before he goes to rehab. And I just feel like that's just so honest and but really funny. I mean, drug abuse isn't funny, but like
no, but
you know what I'm saying?
He made a really taboo topic funny. Like
absolutely.
But it was and I think there is a huge nugget about our life and faith in this, and like personalizing it and making it something that was accessible. And I've talked to you, like it was actually a huge catalyst for me, is like continuing to like double down on not drinking. Watching that, I was like, his self-awareness and honesty, I was like, his humor was funny, but like the truth that was in it was like on point. And I was like, I was super into it.
But if like Nick Kroll had had said in his special John Mulaney's drug addiction or like substance abuse, when that's like not something that we've seen of him, it wouldn't have been compelling and would have probably felt condescending. Yeah. Fully agree. So I just wanted to touch base with you again on that, because I gave it another shot, and it might be my favorite John Mulaney special now.
I love that. I do have a recommendation, actually.
Okay.
I forgot, because I watched it in one sitting. It's only like 6 episodes. I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson is like the third
it's
season. It's
renowned in the St. Louis comedy community.
Oh, is it? Like I feel like no one talks about it.
Yeah.
And every season was killer. And this one was my least favorite of the 3, but it was still like it was like side-splitting laughter the whole way. And his comedy is like one of my favorite types of comedy.
The Heavy Anchor had I Think You Should Leave Day the other day.
Did they?
It was like a trivia, and then they did some skits or something. Yeah.
I go on CapCut just to look for templates of him to turn into TikToks.
I love that.
I think he's so funny. So I Think You Should Leave and Baby J. Those are our recommendations.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, one
Good
more
talk.
down. Next time we meet, it's episode 52.
Year.
We're gonna be 1 year old.
1 year old. We should have it's not winter. I was like, we could do a winter wonderland. I love all the like 1 year old themed birthday parties.
I think they're great. I want to do this.
The Deconstruction zone.
Oof, I hated that. Before we go, I will say this: a couple of things. First being, you should, if you don't already, we're slowly rising in people watching on YouTube. So don't forget to watch and subscribe if you watch there. But also, like, that's actually where we get some of our most comments on some of the shorts, but also on the videos. So if you don't already, like, we would love you to do that. Also, I don't think we've ever pushed this, but if you listen, we would love, like, leave a review. Like, it helps other people find it. Like, if you like this,
if you don't
leave
like
a review.
it,
if you don't like it, leave a bad review. I think be honest with us.
Cool.
But I would prefer a 5-star
Not what I would
review.
say. If you don't like it, keep it to yourself.
And then the last 2 things. One, we are going to do this Zoom book study. So we're going to be sending information out about it.
Oh.
We're going to be talking about how people can get into this. And we're going to be
I'm
doing
all
it.
in.
So
Will your wife be a part of it?
I think so. She's the most excited about it.
I know.
And then the last thing, I want to do like an entire episode just where we read emails.
We kind of did that a while ago.
And I want us to now for the next, starting today. This episode's coming out on Tuesday. That's somethingeth. We're going to wait sometime in July. We're going to do a full episode of emails. And so we're going to be pushing on social media. emails.
And I just want to say one thing is I just would really love if when you submit a question, you submit like a question. Because sometimes people just write like one word topics, and I'm just like, I just would love a question. I don't know. I felt like that was kind of rude how I said it, but I just like, I just kind of, that would be cool.
Oh, well, maybe I'll do this next episode. Actually, someone reached out to us that we talked about.
I read that. That was so cute.
Yeah, we'll talk about. We'll save that for a later episode.
Okay.
So.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening and embrace the journey.